Okay, let's talk about another way to build sentences, something a little more creative. Let's talk about similes. As I'm sure you're aware, a simile is a comparison using like or as, but it can also use so or than. A lot of us probably think of similes as something that fancy authors do, but we can use them too. So what's the point of a simile? The purpose of a simile is to capture the essence of one thing by comparing it to something completely different. The description should be fresh and revealing, so you need to avoid cliches. So, how do you write one? Well, you need to find the thing you want to describe and think of the characteristic of that thing you want to describe. And then you need to think of something else that has that similar characteristic, but usually you want it to be a more intense version because you're emphasizing, you're exaggerating probably. It's also important to consider the connotation you're going for. Is it going to be a positive comparison or a negative comparison? So let's dissect a simile by a famous author. This one's from John Steinbeck. She was a pale blonde with a skin like clean and polished bone. Well, there's our like, which makes it a simile, and her skin is compared to bone. Now, at the beginning of this comparison, with the skin like clean, positive, polished, positive, and then we get to bone, and all of a sudden, the simile takes on a darker and more morbid meaning. And it's that dissonance between where we think the simile is going. We think it's going in a positive direction. The distance between where we think it's going and where it ends up, that bone, that makes it effective and makes it surprising. Let's look at another one. This is by Louisa May Alcott, the author of Little Women. It says, all sorts of pleasant things happened about that time, for the new friendship flourished like grass in spring. So here is our simile. The new friendship flourished like grass in spring. Obviously, unlike the previous simile, this is very positive. And she's talking about a friendship growing, so she thinks, well, what are things that grow? Well, grass grows in the spring, and it's fresh, and we wait for that grass to grow because we've just gone through winter. Like, there's a lot of things loaded when you compare something with a season, because spring means there's a newness. Things are coming back alive again, or they feel that way anyway. So this comparison makes it sound like this person needed a friendship. They've been waiting for a new friendship. And so when it finally comes, it feels like springtime. It's a good simile. So here's another method for writing fresh similes. I got this from a blog called The Right Practice. It says to make the comparison between two different senses. So instead of comparing something tall to something else that's tall, compare it to something that suggests tallness in a different way. Or, for instance, here is a simile I wrote. The pop song sounded like a 3-minute slap in the face. Well, slap in the face is something you feel, but I'm talking about sound, so I'm comparing sound to touch, but it makes it surprising and effective. So that's a method you could use too. So here's our normal base clauses, and let's add a simile to them. The snow began to fall softer than a whisper. Now see, there's an example of a simile using than. So it doesn't always use like or as. Sometimes it uses so or than. This is an example of it using than. But again, snow falling is something that you usually think of as visual, but a whisper is something as sound. So I'm comparing something visual to sound. Kendall drove home. Now, if we wanted to write a cliche, we could write something like a bat out of hell, but we want to avoid cliches. So you want to come up with something new. So Kendall drove home like a blindfolded toddler. And now we see that that's clearly a negative connotation. She's not driving very well, but effective. Now for this next one, it says Nellie elbowed the opposing player. Maybe I don't want to do a simile about Nellie elbowing. Maybe I want to do a simile about the opposing player. Nellie elbowed the opposing player, who fell like a chopped tree. So here's our simile. And it creates an image of a person just toppling over after Nellie elbowed her. So we're going to practice trying to use similes to make our writing feel more creative, fresher, more alive. Mindeman out.